Cheers, loser, we're getting divorced. I already posted it online. My wife said at our anniversary dinner, and thinking I'd beg her to stay. Instead, I quietly took back every house, car and dollar she thought was hers. My wife clinked her wine glass against mine and said it like it was the punchline of a joke. Cheers, we're getting divorced. I already posted it online. She smiled so widely I could see her back molar, which still had lipstick on it. The people at the next table turned to look. She didn't care. Hell, she wanted an audience. The wine in her glass was still swirling when I reached into my jacket and pulled out the house keys. I placed them next to her fork as if I were leaving a tip. Good luck tomorrow, I said. No anger, no raised voice, just those 4 words. Then I stood up, pushed in my chair, and left 2 crisp $100 bills on the table. The waiter rushed over with a polite nod. I returned the gesture. Melissa tilted her head like a confused dog, her lips slightly parted. Wait, what? She asked, but I didn't answer. I was already walking out the door, past the valet stand into the cool night air. She was still laughing behind me. I could hear her even with the door closed. She thought she had me by the throat. She had no idea she had just toasted to her own coffin, one she had designed herself. And for the record, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, it really helps the team behind this bring you more stories like this one. Over 90% of you listen to us without subscribing. It's just one click, but it motivates us more than you can imagine. Now let's get back to her little victory dinner. You see, Melissa had always been theatrical. Not in a charming, eccentric way, more like the type of person who needs to be the center of attention or she'll die. If it wasn't on social media, it didn't happen. If no one was watching, she didn't care to feel. She had her phone propped up against the water pitcher, recording a reel. I could see the caption on the screen even before she hit post. Year 18, finally free. It was our anniversary dinner. 18 years of marriage. I still remembered her in her green Converse sneakers at that gas station in Utah, talking about saving stray dogs. The woman across from me now would trade a stray dog for a brand collaboration any day of the week. She thought I would plead or beg, maybe cry. What she didn't realize, what she never bothered to realize, is that for the last 3 years, I've been discreetly moving the pieces of the puzzle into place. You don't live with a narcissist that long without learning to breathe silently, to smile while you're bleeding. You also learn that the most dangerous thing a man can do is wait, especially a man who owns more than just the house. She believed she was entitled to half the assets, half the savings, half the retirement I built. But she never asked questions when I made those late-night calls. She never realized that the trust documents I left on the coffee table weren't theoretical. She would glance at them, scoff, and go back to editing her videos. Paul's little hobby, she would say. That hobby now owned everything. I remember the waiter asking me just before I left, "Was everything to your liking, sir?" I looked at Melissa for a second. She was still holding her glass mid-toast, her eyes darting between her phone screen and me, as if she couldn't decide which reality to live in. I smiled and said, "It will be." By the time she realized what I meant, the lock codes had already been changed. The bank manager already had new instructions, and the supposed shared accounts were never shared, only masked. Every asset she flaunted online was in a revocable trust. Every car title had been discreetly re-registered. Even the lease on her independent business studio, signed by a holding company, mine, toasted to her freedom. She had no idea she was toasting to her financial extinction. Melissa woke up like a child on Christmas morning, except instead of gifts, she had comments, likes, and direct messages flooding her phone. Overnight, her little announcement had gone viral in her small, curated corner of Instagram. The post was simple: a glass of wine, a designer suitcase, and the caption "Freedom." At last, with a kissing face and a victory hand sign emoji. Her makeup was flawless. She had taken the photo right after I left the restaurant. The caption was already written before I had even paid the bill. That part made me laugh later. She was so sure of the script she thought she was writing. A strong woman finally breaking free from the boring insurance guy. A hero for the brunch crowd. In her mind, I was going to beg. Maybe send flowers, plead with her not to leave, tell her I would change. That's what her followers expected too. Comment after comment told her she was so brave, so inspiring, and a total queen. What she didn't expect, what none of them expected, was that the moment her little empowerment fantasy took off, her phone screen would go black. At first, she thought it was a glitch. She tapped it, swiped. Nothing. She plugged it into the charger. Still nothing. Then the Apple logo flickered and froze, over and over. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about needing a Genius Bar appointment. But then the real blow came. She opened her laptop, trying to log into the joint bank account, the one she used for spa treatments, boutique shopping, and those business expenses that somehow always ended up at Nordstrom. Invalid password. She tried again. Same result. She clicked Forgot Password. Access denied. Now the eye roll turned into a sharp inhale. Melissa wasn't used to digital resistance. She called the bank. You could practically hear the irritation in her voice before she even got to the menu options. Yes. Hi, this is Melissa Howard. I can't access my account. Ma'am, the representative said after a pause. We cannot give information to anyone other than the primary signatory. I'm his wife, she snapped. I'm on the account. Another pause. Ma'am, the representative said more carefully this time. You were removed yesterday at 4:47 p.m. Your access has been revoked by the primary account holder. Silence. Then what the hell are you talking about? I can give you the branch manager's number if you'd like to discuss it further. She hung up. A call came in from her assistant at the studio. Melissa tried to answer. The call dropped. She tried again. The phone shut off completely. She threw it across the room. Her heart was racing now, not just because she couldn't spend money, but because she couldn't understand how I had moved so fast. In her mind, she was the one with the initiative. She had posted her freedom like a victory flag. She expected people to comment, "Leave him, girl," and for me to be the one who looked lost, confused, and pathetic. Instead, she was locked out of everything. She got in her car and drove to the bank. She still had her driver's license. After all, her name had to mean something. The teller looked confused when she arrived. I need to speak to the manager, she said. Regarding what, he asked. My joint account, she snapped. The manager came out moments later, polite, nervous. I'm sorry, Mrs. Howard. Without authorization from the primary signatory, I can't provide any information. Do you know who I am? You've seen me in here a dozen times. Yes, but that's irrelevant. Now call him. Call Paul. I'm not leaving until I speak to him. The manager hesitated. She saw it. That flicker of something behind his eyes. Respect, maybe fear. And that's when she realized it. Not all at once, but like a slow-acting poison. I hadn't just let her announce the divorce. I had prepared for it. Every move she made that morning was like running full speed into a wall she hadn't even seen was there. Not because it was hidden, but because she never bothered to look. Her pride had blinded her. Outside the bank, her car, low battery. Then another message appeared on her screen briefly before the system crashed again. Primary user access revoked. Contact account administrator. For the first time in years, Melissa was not in control of the narrative, and she was starting to realize she never really had been. By the time Melissa stormed into the branch that afternoon, the sun had lost its warmth. She parked crookedly, taking up 2 spots, slammed the car door without bothering to lock it, and marched across the sidewalk as if the ground owed her an apology. Her hair was perfect, of course. The same overproduced look, effortless effort, that she wore in every video, but her eyes were jittery, her jaw too tight. That crack in the armor was growing. She went straight to the main counter and dropped her purse on it with a thud. I need to speak with your manager, she snapped, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. A mother with a toddler looked up. An older man near the mortgage window frowned. The young man behind the counter swallowed hard. Do you have an appointment? Do I look like I need one? She hissed. Just tell him Melissa Howard is here. He knows me. He didn't know her. That was the problem. The assistant disappeared. A few mumbled words through the frosted glass door. Then Charles, the branch manager, emerged, a man Melissa had dismissed a dozen times as the little rulemonger with coffee breath. He had the cautious gait of someone approaching a bear trap. Mrs. Howard, he said carefully, I understand you're having trouble accessing certain services. I'm having trouble accessing my own life, she snapped. I've been locked out of everything, and your customer service people have been useless. You need to fix this now. Charles glanced over his shoulder as if buying time. As I told you this morning, the accounts in question are controlled by the primary signatory. I am his wife, she said, enunciating each syllable as if for a courtroom performance. He clasped his hands together. That is no longer a qualifying condition under the current structure. Melissa blinked. The what? He seemed pained. A trust entity was established last year with controlling authority over all major holdings. We are legally bound to follow the instructions of that entity's signatory. And you're telling me I'm not on it? He hesitated. She leaned in, her voice sharp. Then call him right now. I want to see him tell me this to my face. And just then, like a cruelly timed hallucination, the bell over the bank's main entrance chimed. Melissa turned, and Paul walked in. Not the man in khaki pants and mild manners she thought she knew. Not the guy who always wore the same watch and fumbled through his phone settings like an old man at a coffee shop. This Paul was wearing a tailored navy suit. Tie knotted with precision, shoes shined. No wedding ring, no trace of confusion or hesitation, just a quiet calm and purpose. The kind of man who didn't arrive when summoned, but when it was time. The air shifted. A young woman at the loan desk instinctively sat up straighter. The security guard gave a small nod. Melissa stepped back as Paul walked past her without a glance, straight to Charles. Sir, the manager said quickly. We're ready to begin. Melissa's voice broke. What the hell is going on? Paul finally looked at her. Not angry, not smug, just tired. I told you, he said quietly. Good luck tomorrow. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She couldn't understand. She couldn't process the sudden role reversal. The man she had mocked for years, called boring, outdated, just a pension on legs, was now speaking a language of power she didn't understand. And what was worse, everyone else in the room did. Charles handed Paul a clipboard. Paul didn't hesitate. He signed something, nodded, and began discussing transfer documentation with 3 staff members who had suddenly appeared. Melissa didn't recognize any of them. She had assumed she knew everyone Paul worked with. After all, she thought he was a quiet retiree from the boring side of insurance. What she never bothered to ask, what she never cared enough to investigate, was what I actually did. She missed the quiet name change on the LLC records 3 years ago. She never noticed the corporate notices that arrived under a holding company she never Googled. She thought the leather binder I kept in the study was just legal reading for before bed. The kind of stuff old guys read before falling asleep watching cable news. In reality, that binder contained the operational architecture of shell companies, the schematics of trusts, and the signatures that made me the sole controller of every asset that had her name near it. And the best part, she had signed off on half of it, usually with a distracted smile and a simple, just tell me where to scribble. Now she stood there, in a bank where no one took her seriously, watching the man she thought she knew calmly dismantle the illusion she had built around herself. She reached for her phone again, still frozen. Her image, for once, couldn't save her because this wasn't a story she could edit and post. This was reality. And in reality, Paul, the man she had underestimated for 18 years, wasn't retired, he was just waiting. Melissa slammed the front door so hard the hallway mirror trembled. She kicked off her heels with enough force to send one flying against the wall. Then she stormed into the living room like a woman ready to wage war on drywall. Her perfectly manicured hand snatched the thick divorce agreement binder from the console table where she had tossed it weeks ago. Back then, when she thought signing it was just a formality, like submitting a resignation letter you've already bragged about on Instagram, she hadn't even read it. Why would she? She was in charge. She had the upper hand, the narrative, the followers. Paul was just supposed to shuffle off quietly into that long, boring sunset in a golf cart. Now the document in her hands hummed like a live wire. She flipped it open, skimming past the main agreement, the clauses she had glanced over. The ones that looked like the kind of standard text lawyers write in their sleep. Alimony expectations, property division, car titles, all familiar. All things she had laughed at over Chardonnay while telling her sister. He just wants out. I'm letting him. But that night, her fingers stopped dead on a page near the end. It didn't have the same format as the others. It had a signature in blue ink, hers, a second notarized signature, Paul's lawyer's, and a heading in small, centered text that read Supplementary Clause C, Discretionary Oversight and Conditional Waiver. She squinted, then read it, and her stomach lurched. In the event that the division of assets is initiated under circumstances deemed reputationally damaging, performative, or publicly derogatory, all agreed-upon transfers may be subject to a discretionary audit and delay under the authority of the Revocable Estate Trust. Hereinafter, the trust. There it was, in legalese, clear as day, mocking her online, publicly ridiculing the divorce, turning their separation into a trendy reel with wine glasses and hashtags. She triggered the clause the moment she said, "Cheers, we're getting divorced," on camera, and Paul knew it. She checked the date next to the signatures. It was from the morning after her trip to Colorado Springs, when she handed him a pen and muttered, "Just sign it, so we can stop dragging this out." He had looked at her for 3 long seconds and then signed. She had been so smug about it. She told her friends, "He's too old to fight. He just wants to be left alone." No, he just wanted a paper trail. She pulled out her phone. Dead. She ran to her laptop, opened Chrome, logged into Instagram, deleted the divorce post, deleted the finally free reel, deleted the video of her friends clinking glasses over a welcome to singlehood cake. Then she opened Facebook, removed every status, every sarcastic comment, wiping her digital fingerprints like a fugitive at a crime scene. But it was too late. At the end of Supplementary Clause C was an addendum. All publicly accessible materials may be submitted as demonstrative evidence to the Trust Council. Retraction does not nullify effect. He had screenshots. She knew he had screenshots, probably not just hers, probably notarized and time-stamped files from his lawyer. Paul had always been methodical. She just never respected it. She thought his discipline was a symptom of boredom. She never realized it was armor. Now, every smug caption, every laughing emoji, every passive-aggressive TikTok she had made was a blade pointed at her own throat. Her power move, just Exhibit A. She stumbled to the kitchen. Suddenly thirsty, she grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water. Her hands were shaking. She spilled half of it on the counter. It wasn't just that she might not get half. The clause opened the door to a complete reassessment. If the trust decided she had violated the good faith element, and it was designed to, everything could be paused, reviewed, indefinitely, and discretionary. That meant Paul's legal team was in control. She could be stuck in limbo for months, years, no house, no studio, no cars, no retirement withdrawals. Melissa slid down the cabinet to the floor, still clutching the glass. She stared at the tiles, her breath coming in short gasps. For 18 years, she had assumed she was the smart one, the one who understood influence, manipulation, image. She forgot a simple truth. You don't measure intelligence by how loud someone is. You measure it by how quietly they prepare while you're gloating. Paul didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just drafted Clause AC and waited. The next morning, Melissa woke up before dawn, not out of ambition, but because she had spent the night digging down a rabbit hole she had created herself. 3 hours of internet searches, 5 hours of rummaging through papers, and half a bottle of Sancerre later, she sat slumped in a silk robe at the kitchen island. Mascara smudged, laptop glowing, hands still trembling. She started with a name, Rowan Sentinel Holdings, LLC. She had seen it in the trust clause the night before. She thought it was just some shell company Paul's lawyer had made up, but when she typed it into the public property search site, there it was, the house in Rowan's name. The Audi she drove to Pilates every Thursday, Rowan's. Even the downtown studio where she ran her luxury home decor consultancy, a space she regularly boasted about owning outright, listed Rowan Sentinel Holdings as the property owner. Her name was on no deed. She blinked, scanned again, still nothing. Rowan Sentinel Holdings had quietly absorbed everything over the course of the last 3 years. All title transfers with retained use rights. Something Paul explained to her once at dinner while she was half listening and looking at purse ads. She remembered that night clearly now. She had laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, is this your little retirement game, Paul?" she had joked over wine. "You and your invisible empire. So mysterious." He hadn't responded, just looked at her, blinked once, and said, "I prefer quiet assets." She had rolled her eyes. She thought it was adorable. The way he obsessed over paperwork, documents, corporate structures. She called it Old Man Tetris. She never asked what the company actually did. It turns out Rowan Sentinel wasn't just a trust vehicle. It was a holding company, one Paul had formed with ironclad governance. It had its own bylaws, its own advisory board, its own council. The paper trail stretched across 3 states and 4 legal jurisdictions. It was legitimate and absolutely not hers. The only thing Melissa technically owned now was her wardrobe, her paid-off credit card balance, and the tote bag she got as a PR gift at an interior design conference. Everything else had been loaned to her under terms she never read. Terms buried in the updates she ignored every time Paul emailed her a document with a quick, "Just click to approve." She clicked every time without asking questions. She thought she was signing off on some meaningless tax efficiency play. She was seeding the castle room by room. The worst part, the revocable trust gave Paul full discretion to withdraw access from any beneficiary in the event of conflict, misconduct, or— Melissa froze on this line. Demonstrated malice or reputational damage. She didn't need a lawyer to translate that. Her posts, her jokes, the wine glass photo, all documented. The night before, the trust had issued an internal notice. She saw the PDF forwarded from an anonymous email, probably Paul's way of twisting the knife. Beneficiary access revoked. IDM Howard. The date was yesterday's. Melissa picked up her phone, which was finally working again after a forced factory reset, and opened her banking app. Declined. She opened her calendar. The day was filled with client consultations, people she had promised luxury redesigns to, most of them based on the aesthetic of her former home. She couldn't even get back inside to take new pictures. She sent a frantic email to her assistant. "Take everything off the site that references the showcase house now." Then another, "We still have the renders for the Dunlap project. Use those instead." She paused. That project was also in Paul's name, and the license was too. She had nothing, no anchor, no leverage, not even a fake narrative to cling to. She clicked back to the public business database. Rowan Sentinel Holdings had a list of directors, 6 names. She recognized none of them. Paul's name wasn't even there. That's when it truly hit her. This wasn't a last-minute act of revenge, not a panicked move from a humiliated husband. This was a strategy executed years in advance. The trust had been growing, absorbing, and registering while she danced in front of phone cameras and planned her public exit. Paul didn't just plan for the divorce. He planned for there to be nothing left when she left. She was taking the show. He was keeping the stage, the rights, the lighting rig, and the theater lease. Melissa stared at her own reflection in the dark screen. Her whole life, she had assumed she was the smartest one in the room. It turns out the quietest man at the table had been building a fortress while she was bragging about stealing the key. The spa receptionist smiled as Melissa handed over the gleaming platinum card with her signature rose gold manicure. "Let's keep the steam room for another hour," she said breezily, pushing her sunglasses up on her head. She needed this, a deep tissue massage, a facial, maybe a glass of cucumber champagne in the garden lounge, something to reset her energy, refocus her power, remind herself who the hell she was. Then the beep sounded. The card terminal flashed red. The machine made a chirping sound. "Declined. Sorry. Could you try that again?" Melissa said with a laugh too loud to be real. "Probably a chip error." The receptionist tried again. Same result. Melissa leaned in, whispering, "Run it as credit." The woman looked uncomfortable. "It says account restricted." Melissa blinked. "That's the shared account." "Run it again, ma'am." The woman began, but Melissa was already pulling out her phone. She dialed the customer service number. Her nails tapped on the counter. "Yes. Hi. I'm calling about a declined card." "Yes, my name is Melissa Howard. My husband and I share this account." A pause. "Ma'am," the agent replied, "you were removed from that account 3 days ago." "No, that's not right. This is our main account." "Not anymore." Melissa hung up mid-sentence. She stormed out of the spa, robe flapping, heels clacking against the tiles. She got to her car, her sleek white Mercedes convertible, and yanked the door open. The digital dashboard flashed a warning. "Vehicle requires verification. Owner override engaged." She tried to start it. Nothing. She slammed the door. "Are you kidding me?" Then she noticed the name on the registration in the glove box. Paul W. Howard. It wasn't hers, never was. She grabbed her purse and walked 5 blocks to the bank, sweating through her expensive workout set. When she arrived, she slapped her palm against the glass entrance to get someone's attention. Inside, Charles, the manager, saw her. He came to the door himself. "I need access," she hissed. "All of this is freezing everything." He opened the door just enough to speak. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Howard. I told you the accounts are under review by the Trust's legal division. Access is frozen until the audit concludes." "What audit?" "It's standard protocol after a clause activation. You should have been notified." "Clause? What clause?" He didn't answer, just looked at her like a man watching someone drown in a pool they'd bragged about diving into. She turned and stormed away, dialing Paul's number. Straight to voicemail. She sent a message. "You can't do this." She paced in front of the building across the street, jaw tight, thumbs flying. Another message. "This is financial abuse. I'll tell everyone. You look insane." The reply came 30 seconds later. "Legally done." 3 words like a bullet through bone. She gasped. Fingers curled around the phone. She tried calling again, straight to voicemail. Fine, she thought. I'll go home. Her real home. The one she designed, painted, filmed tours of for her followers. She called a rideshare and directed it to the gated community. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror a couple of times, probably noticing her wild expression and smeared mascara. When she arrived, she got out and punched in the gate code. Access denied. She tried again. Access denied. She called the intercom, no answer. After a full 5 minutes, a neighbor drove in and Melissa slipped through the gate behind them. She got to the front door and grabbed the knob. Locked. She checked under the planter. Not there. No spare key. She went around the house to the side door near the patio. Locked. She picked up a rock from the garden edging and seriously considered breaking the window. But something in her stopped. Not because she feared the consequences, but because, for the first time since this spiral began, she realized she didn't even know what she still had. She sat on the front steps, her legs shaking. Inside that house was everything she thought she controlled. Her walk-in closet, her designer kitchen, her custom bathtub, her fake ferns, her curated lighting, her lifestyle. But the locks had been changed. The ownership had been changed, and she was just another woman sitting on someone else's porch, begging to be let back into a dream she hadn't built. She stared at the door. The door didn't move, and neither did Paul. He didn't answer, didn't argue, didn't shout. He just deleted her, system by system, not out of malice, but with the same quiet precision she used to curate her fake perfect life. The erasure wasn't emotional, it was systematic. She had become a ghost in her own story, and only now was she realizing it was never really hers to begin with. Melissa had just finished her 3rd espresso of the morning, though finished meant spilling most of it on her wrist during a frantic attempt to access another locked-out platform, when her divorce lawyer, Nolan, barged into her apartment uninvited. She hadn't seen him this flustered since he botched her previous business partnership settlement, one she swore she'd recover from by marrying better next time. His tie was crooked, his face pale. He dropped his leather briefcase on the marble island like it owed him money. "You didn't tell me about the trust," he barked. She blinked, stunned by his tone. "Excuse me." He pulled out a manila folder, slapped it on the counter, and leaned over it like a man presenting a murder weapon, or the post-nuptial agreement he filed 2 years ago. Melissa's mouth went slack. What post-nuptial agreement? Nolan flipped the folder open with the kind of aggressive precision normally reserved for courtroom theater. Inside was a high-resolution scanned copy of a contract complete with a notary seal, a lawyer's countersignature, and her own performative, looping signature at the bottom, adorned with a little heart over the I in Melissa. She stared at it, as if it were a forged document. Some kind of joke. "I've never seen this," she said, though the sentence sounded weak even to her. "You signed it," Nolan snapped, "right after that trip to Sedona 2 years ago." "That's impossible," she said, her hands already shaking. "I'd remember." "You didn't read it," he cut her off. "He sent it to you through DocuSign with the subject line, Household Financial Updates. You clicked, you signed. You were at the spa. I checked the timestamp. 5 minutes after you posted a boomerang of that mud bath on the cliff." Melissa's lips parted. Her heart was pounding. Suddenly, she did remember that day, the resort robe, her second mimosa. Paul had texted her something like, "Need you to sign this before Friday." She was annoyed. She was oily from a sea salt wrap. She wanted to get back to looking at pillow swatches for the study redesign, so she signed. Never looked, never asked. Nolan tapped the document. "This nullifies all community property claims. Everything." Her voice cracked. "That can't be legal." "It is legal," he shot back, pulling out another page. "Because your signature is here, and again here, initialed. The notary seal done remotely, approved by your existing estate lawyer, whose contract you terminated last year because you didn't like her tone." Melissa grabbed the page, reading it quickly with blurry eyes. It was all there, cold, clinical, clean. Clause 4. In the event of separation or divorce, any property held in the name of a trust or corporate entity shall remain the sole legal asset of the designated holder. Clause 43. The spouse acknowledges and agrees that no claim may be filed against said entities in any future action. Clause 47. The agreement supersedes any previous assumption of shared asset rights under local marital property laws. She looked up at Nolan, barely breathing. "Why didn't you catch this?" she asked weakly. "I can't catch documents you never told me existed," he retorted. "Do you even know how many of your assets were under a trust at the time of your signature?" She didn't. Of course she didn't. Paul had been handling things. She had been filming Get Ready With Me videos in silk pajamas. The legal side of their marriage was always his job. She was the face, he was the backbone. She assumed the backbone didn't matter when you were pretty enough. "You've been operating under the assumption you'd get half," Nolan continued. "Half the house, half the cars, at least a partial stake of the studio lease. But guess what? You don't own the studio, you don't own the cars, you don't even own the domain for the website your design brand runs on. It's registered to one of his holding companies, and the admin email is his lawyer's." Melissa gripped the edge of the counter. "Fix it," she said quietly. "I can't fix it," he said, throwing his hands up. This wasn't an oversight. It was a full-blown legal trap. You walked into it in a cloud of eucalyptus steam and closed the door behind you. She slumped onto a barstool, staring at the folder as if it might catch fire. 2 years ago, that was when she still thought Paul was harmless, a little dull, a little gray around the edges. She used to call him the human retirement plan. She'd say it behind his back at brunch. She thought she was so clever, but while she was laughing with her friends over overpriced Eggs Benedict, he was securing the perimeter of his empire, brick by brick. Now she was the one trapped inside. No weapons, no map, and worst of all, she had built the cage herself with a single careless click. The call came just after noon. Melissa was sitting on the floor of her studio, surrounded by fabric swatches and overpriced candles she used for staging. A cappuccino sat untouched beside her, the foam slowly collapsing like the rest of her week. She answered on the second ring, forcing a smile into her voice as she always did. "Hi, Janice." Silence. Then, "Melissa, we're pulling out." The words landed like a slap. "Wait, what?" "We're canceling the Newton remodel with immediate effect." Melissa blinked, stunned. "It's a 6-month project. You signed a design agreement. We're in phase 2. The tiles are all ready." Janice cut her off. "We've spoken with our legal department. There's an exit clause." Melissa stood up slowly, gripping the edge of her desk. "Why?" Another pause. Then the real blow came. "There are rumors, Melissa," Janice said carefully. "Online. People are saying you misrepresented the ownership of the design space, that your business is entangled in legal disputes. There's a rumor about a trust seizing your assets and something about fraud." Melissa's throat tightened. "None of that is true." Janice exhaled wearily. "I wanted to believe that, but our CFO found the property record this morning. You don't own the studio. Rowan Sentinel Holdings does. The same entity listed on multiple asset liens across the state. It's your husband's company, isn't it, ex-husband?" She wanted to scream it, but the word got stuck in her mouth. "You told us this space was yours," Janice continued, her voice colder now. "You said you bought it outright, that it was your creative home." "It is," Melissa insisted. "I run it." "You run it," Janice repeated. "But you don't own it. There's a difference, and we can't risk being dragged into someone else's collapse." The line went dead. Melissa stared at her phone for a long time before she let it drop from her hand to the rug. Collapse. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was happening. By 3 p.m., 3 more clients had postponed their projects indefinitely. One had already filed a PayPal claim demanding a refund for a mood board in progress. Another asked her assistant if Melissa was under investigation. The whispers in the design community spread fast, faster than any marketing campaign she had ever launched. She lied about owning the property. She's being sued for fraud. She's bankrupt. Worse than bankrupt. People didn't want trendsetters with lawsuits. They wanted clean aesthetics, inspiring captions, and the illusion of success. Melissa no longer fit the brand. She opened the lease agreement on her iPad, ready to cancel before things got worse, before someone sued her, before this all became a spectacle. The document was sleek, a signed PDF labeled Property Branding and Occupancy Agreement, Studio 4A. She scrolled to the signature page. There it was. Owner, Rowan Signal Holdings, LLC. Tenant, Melissa Howard. Occupancy license only. She stared. License only. No lease, no rental rights, no tenant protections. She hadn't noticed before. Paul had handled it all when she said, I don't do paperwork. Just make it pretty and simple for me. He had made it too simple. She scrolled further down. Clause 8. The licensor reserves the right to revoke occupancy at will with 15 days' notice if the licensee is determined to have engaged in breach of the reputational conduct standards outlined in Section 6. She clicked to Section 6. One line stood out in bold. The licensee shall not engage in public conduct that brings reputational harm to the licensor or associated entities. Every post, every video, every snarky caption with Paul's name veiled in sarcasm suddenly lit up in her memory like a minefield. This wasn't just a clause, it was a tripwire. She tried calling the trust's legal office. A woman answered in a monotone voice. Yes, Mrs. Howard, your access license is scheduled for revocation in 10 business days. You will receive an official notification by courier. I recommend you begin the relocation process. Melissa laughed, or maybe she choked. It was hard to tell. Relocate where? That's outside our purview, the voice said. We only manage the property rights. And just like that, the studio was gone. Not in a fire, not in a scandal, quietly. She stood in the center of her empire, the space she had posted, filmed, and bragged about for years. The place she called her sanctuary no longer belonged to her. It never had. The photos on her website taken in a space that wasn't hers. The brand she sold built on rights she didn't read. The empire she flaunted built on borrowed land. And the owner had just reclaimed it. Melissa sank onto the velvet sofa under the gold-framed painting that read, Manifested. The irony almost made her laugh again. Almost. Melissa was curled up on her mother's guest bed, knees tucked under a blanket that smelled of lavender and old age. Her once impeccable nails were chipped. Her phone on its last 6% of battery. For 2 days, she had been living like a fugitive in her own life, staying in the apartment she once called a Plan B, surrounded by floral wallpaper and porcelain angels that made her itch. Her mother had fallen silent, tired of the drama, tired of the legal this, trust that, tired of the daughter who once walked with her nose in the air but now roamed the kitchen like a rabid raccoon. When the phone lit up, she almost didn't answer. Restricted number. She hesitated, swiped. Hello, Mrs. Howard, a clipped voice said. This is Rena Keeler from the Hill Senior Complex Property Management. I'm calling regarding Unit 3B, the apartment listed in your mother's name. Melissa sat up straight. What about it? We've received instructions from Rowan Sentinel Holdings regarding the lien on the property. They will be proceeding with the reassignment. No, I don't understand. That place is my mother's. What does Paul have to do with it? Another pause. The original down payment was issued through a discretionary trust associated with Mr. Paul Howard. The lien was recorded accordingly. We have received documents authorizing its transfer. Melissa's throat tightened. Transfer to what? To the holding company. Effective immediately, utility coverage has been suspended. Water and power will be shut off in 5 business days unless other arrangements are made. You can't do that. You can't just leave us with nothing. My mother is, she is. Mrs. Howard, I recommend you secure alternative housing within the 30-day notice period. This isn't personal, it's a financial reassignment. Melissa gripped the edge of the bed, her voice shaking. You're putting me on the street. I'm simply following legal protocol. The call ended before she could respond. She sat there, mouth open, disbelief turning into something much darker. She went to text Paul, her fingers stabbing at the screen. You sick bastard. This is my mother's house. She has nothing to do with this. There was no reply. Not for hours. Not until dusk painted the walls with gray-blue shadows and her reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a woman who hadn't slept in a month. Then, a ping, a message from Paul, just one. I gave you the keys, you turned them into weapons. I've only taken them back. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, to storm into whatever office he was hiding in and demand to know how he could be so cold. She wanted to say it wasn't fair, that he was being vengeful, cruel, punishing her for things she didn't mean. But what could she say that didn't ring with hypocrisy? She had celebrated the divorce before it was real. She turned it into a performance. She turned him into a punchline. There were memes, reels, group chats, mocking the old guy still stuck in analog. And now the old guy had outplayed her in the one language that never goes out of style, legal infrastructure. She had lived in the luxury built on his silence. She assumed silence meant weakness. She assumed kindness meant blindness. She assumed she'd be the one walking away with the bags and the narrative. Now all she had were headlines in her own mind. Designer evicted. Divorce queen loses studio, apartment, and control. She stood in the kitchen of her mother's apartment, where a single light bulb flickered as if already preparing to go out. No spa day would fix this. No clients to fall back on. No platform left for her to tell her side of the story. She opened the empty fridge, opened the freezer, just her mother's frozen peas and an old ice tray. She took the bottle of white wine from the counter, half empty, warm, and sour, and poured it into a mug. She sat on the floor, pulled the blanket tight. In her ears, the silence screamed. She had run the show for so long. Now she couldn't even keep the lights on. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the bank cast long shadows across the polished floor as Melissa stood at the main counter, disheveled and shaking. Her designer scarf was tied unevenly around her neck. Mascara streaked down both cheeks, and the heels she once wore as armor now clacked with desperation. This was not a woman walking in with purpose. This was someone hoping the building wouldn't notice her shame. "I need to speak with Paul Howard," she said, her voice breaking mid-sentence. "Please, I'm here to settle." The manager Charles emerged from the office again. Same man, different look, less hesitant this time, almost resigned, as if he had been briefed beforehand on exactly how this would go. "Please have a seat," he said kindly. "I believe he's on his way." She didn't sit. She paced. Her phone was almost dead again. She didn't care. Her mother had stopped answering her calls. Her assistant had quit with a one-line email. Her website was down. The studio's Instagram had been discreetly deactivated, probably by Paul's team after the occupancy revocation. Every digital thread she had once woven around herself was frayed and floating. And still, she believed, she hoped, that if she just talked to Paul face to face, she could reverse some of the damage, cry a little, maybe strike a chord, remind him of the early days, prove she wasn't the villain. Then the glass doors swung open, and there he was. Not with arrogance, not with smugness, but in that same tailored suit, that same quiet walk, that same silence that she now finally understood wasn't emptiness, it was power. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout because everything has already been arranged. Her breath caught. Paul nodded at Charles, who stepped aside. The room seemed to pause. Charles asked, "Sir, shall we proceed with the transfer authorization?" Paul looked at Melissa for the first time. Not at her, exactly through her. "Not necessary," he said softly. "We already have full control." Melissa's heart plummeted. Her lips parted. "What do you mean we?" Before the question could hang in the air too long, another figure appeared in the doorway. A woman in a sharp black dress, hair pulled back tightly, carrying a leather binder. She walked in with authority, not confidence, but command. The kind of presence that told you she wasn't bluffing, she didn't need to. She stopped beside Paul, opened the binder, and spoke. "Mrs. Howard," she said in a neutral, surgical tone, as of 9:17 a.m. This morning, per signed instructions and verified action by the Board of Directors of Rowan Sentinel Holdings, you have been formally and permanently removed from all financial accounts, real estate properties, asset trusts, occupancy licenses, operational business agreements, and affiliated access systems. Melissa felt her knees buckle. The woman continued, unfazed. All passwords, authorizations, powers of attorney, and platform credentials have been revoked. Furthermore, a notice has been sent to your credit partners to suspend pending transactions tied to former accounts you previously accessed. You are no longer a beneficiary, signatory, or affiliated party to any of Mr. Howard's holdings. The words were clean, clinical. Melissa grabbed the marble edge of the counter as if it were the only thing holding her up. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't just erase me." Paul didn't respond. The lawyer simply closed her binder and nodded once to the manager, then to Paul. And that was it. Melissa looked at Paul, trying to find something in his face. Pity, rage, regret. Nothing. Just the quiet man she once dismissed, once underestimated, once mocked over dinner while filming a TikTok about men who confuse money with control. It turns out she had gotten it all wrong. Paul didn't confuse money with control. He understood it. And while she had spent months building a narrative, likes, posts, hashtags, champagne toasts, he had spent years building a system. One that could withstand her ego, one that waited silently, and then, when she lit the match, quietly watched as it burned down the bridge she assumed was hers. No raised voice, no vengeful speech, just procedure, final, unyielding. She stood in the middle of the branch. Customers walking around her, the hum of office phones and quiet conversations all merging into a muffled buzz. Paul turned and walked toward the door. Melissa took a step after him, her hand reaching out, not even sure why. He didn't look back, not once, and that more than anything told her it was over. Not the marriage, not the money, not the life. She was gone, and he had already deleted the backup.